Doubter, you're welcome in this place.
Does that answer your question?
I know. You've been to church, right? So let me answer some of your initial concerns and questions. First of all, we're not a cult. We're not here either to shoehorn you into a timeshare or to try to get you to buy used cars. What we are is a marvelously weird, humorous, and eclectic mix of people who've decided to follow Jesus Christ. This common pursuit, it binds us as close as family. And this is a family that's always got room for a few more people.
I don't care who you are.
If you're looking for a place to navigate the big questions of life, you're welcome.
It might work.
If you're interested in a Bible-based community committed to real relationships and real spiritual growth, if you want to discover the truth about God and His plan for your life, you are most welcome at Christ Fellowship at Little Annie.
Well, guys, it's 7:01, which means it is time to begin. Come on in. Don't you love how it feels in here? So good. If only we could get some rain in this area. Let's go ahead and open up with a word of prayer. Lord and God, thank you so much for this evening. Father, thank you for my brothers and sisters in Christ. Thank you that we are part of a supernatural realm and a natural realm. And Father, I pray that we would celebrate both, that Father, you would direct the course of this study, particularly, Father, as we think through deceptions and deceptions within deceptions. Keep our eyes on the prize, keep us focused on you, and I pray, Father, that you'll remind us that these are all in your hands. We love you, Lord. It's in your name we pray. Amen. I think I've shared with some of you guys, this of all the sessions I've prepped for this Wednesday series, I think tonight's session is the one that I probably found the most interesting things in that I was not yet aware of. But the challenge might be kind of pulling the reins on some of that and not going too in-depth on some of these things and ending up here too late or missing out on some of the best stuff that kind of comes up toward the end. But we're going to be tonight, so far in this series, we talked deception and discernment. We talked artificial intelligence, UFOs and UAPs. We discussed aliens. We discussed abduction and missing 411. Did any of you guys watch any missing 411 stuff this past week? I see some nods around the room. It's weird, isn't it? It's, and a little bit engaging. I mean, it's hard to not watch it once you start in on that stuff. Tonight we're going to be discussing the occult and secret societies. And there's actually a lot here to get into. We are not going to discuss every single secret society. I did try to kind of hash through them and find some of the most interesting ones that we have the most reliable information on. The challenge is that last part, reliable. Because it is so easy to put something out there or to contrive something or make something up. So we're going to try to hash out some details on some of the more odd things. Let's start by talking about just conspiracy in general. Somebody define conspiracy for me. How would you describe conspiracy?
Takes 6 months to make it true.
Okay, there it is. It's where most people are right now. It's something that looks insane, and then you just find out later that it absolutely is valid. Okay, any other conceptions about conspiracy? How would you describe it?
Perfect conspiracy cannot be proven.
Okay, all right, so perfect conspiracy is hard to get, right? Because you have to have everybody engaged and involved. Can't prove it, because if it's a perfect conspiracy, that means it is so well hidden, you would never discern or discover it, right? Other things, other features or things you think of when you think conspiracy. Yeah, Bethany. Yeah, okay, so collusion. Many groups are people getting together to sort of mask or hide something. This actually brings us to, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say something, a nugget of truth in there that's believable.
Right.
That could happen. That could be.
Yeah, and oftentimes conspiracy theories are that. Like, they start with some aspect of truth, but then an elaborate story kind of develops and grows up around it. Two or more. It's got, yeah, you can't have a conspiracy by yourself. It's a very lonely conspiracy. It's actually the conjunction of two root words, conspire, which just means breathe together. All right, and the idea is we get together, we breathe quietly together, we talk about things with one another in such a way that we enjoy a truth between the two of us, but we don't let other people know. What stigmas exist surrounding the term? It is a relatively new term, right? It's a term that has not been used traditionally in a lot of cultures throughout history. And the idea of like people speaking about conspiracy in the way we do is not common parlance throughout most of history. So to conspire together in this scenario, and what we're talking about here, like when we say conspiracy, your brain immediately jumps to, we never landed on the moon, right?
Amen.
Right, okay. But like the thing is, or you know, take your fill. The moon is hollow. Yeah, right. Josh is on board with all of these. But like the idea is anything you can think of, lizard people within the earth, whatever else you can think of, like that's the thing where it's like that's the truth, and it's being masked by everybody. Oftentimes, at least traditionally, there were a lot of stigmas attached to this term. If you called someone a conspiracy theorist like 10 years ago, that was a way to utterly dismiss them, right? It was a way to suggest that that person is not reliable and is not to be trusted. At this stage of the game, if you say someone's a conspiracy theorist, you're basically like saying that's a person who thinks a lot. Generally, that's the term, the way we think of it now, isn't it? Or is that just me? Maybe just me. I was listening to some talk show hosts discuss this the other day, and they were saying, you know, they have a girl in their office who just believes everything and is like ready to reiterate everything. And they're like, why do we like her so much despite the fact that she just latches onto every single thing? And they're like, because it shows that at least the wheels are turning, right? But not everybody functions that way. There are moments where you'll bring something up, you'll bring a hypothesis up, and there are people who reject it outright, or they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear arguments for it. They don't want to discuss it. They'd rather not have any internal conflict or controversy. Why do most conspiracies fail to remain hidden? Okay, yes. Sometimes you're going to see some things break out. Some evidence will begin to emerge. Something will show up that details like what was happening was actually occurring. You know, COVID is one of those things, right, where it was like, I don't know if you remember, but initially, if you said that it was man-made, like you were ostracized, they would block you from like social media. YouTube was censoring, like actively censoring videos. Google was censoring any kind of searches along those lines. And what have we found out? It's man-made, right? It was evidently man-made. Turns out that a unique variety of COVID emerged from a territory that had a laboratory named the Novel Coronavirus Laboratory. Imagine that. Isn't it astonishing? Sometimes, no, don't look in this direction. No, a bat kissed a pangolin, and that's what. A lot of times people just start talking, right? So something that was supposed to remain hidden is a hard secret to contain, and people just begin speaking about it and it comes out. This is the hard thing to believe about most conspiracies in general. What kinds of things would be required in order for a conspiracy theory to actually remain hidden? Think about that. If you were going to piece together an actual conspiracy, like something that was going to work, what would be required in order for you to keep people's mouths shut? Blackmail? Government intervention? Expendable people? Death threats? Anything else? Money. Right. Payoffs? Anything else? Propaganda. Yeah, you got to control the information. You have to control the flow of information and who believes what and how they believe something. That's a whole lot, isn't it? It's a lot of things to juggle. There are very few groups, one would think, that could actually juggle that much information and control that many things. Very few groups that would be that influential or that powerful. What would it take to successfully conspire? First of all, it definitely takes buy-in and benefit. If we are going to get together and we're going to conspire on a thing, we're going to contrive something, or we're going to have some secret society, we have to have some vested self-interest in keeping the secret and making sure that others do. All right? In other words, you have to get something from it. I have to get something from it. It might not be money, might not be power, but those things are pretty good for most people. Money, power, influence, those are the things that generally drive people. An implied threat or definitive threat. Implied or explicit threats of harm to anyone treating the secret loosely. You threaten their wealth, their health, their family, or their reputation. If you can control what happens to a person, this is why blackmail is one of the first things that emerges. If you can control what happens to a person, you can ostracize them, you can alienate them, you can hurt them somehow. If you have that power over somebody, then maybe they'll keep your secret. Observation and enforcement is the most perfect and most important piece of this. The idea that you cannot get away with sharing information because you are being watched or heard at all times. Anybody read 1984? Right? The idea of being observed at all times, of being seen at all times. How does China keep so much control right now? They got cameras on every corner. They got cameras at the front of every building. They got cameras in the hallways of most buildings, right? They have robots that actually roam the street and monitor people's faces and detect people's gaits to determine who was where and when. And this is how you get a lot of control over people. This is part of what's so scary about a culture that is absolutely invasive at that level. With all of those features present, what is the greatest challenge to successfully keeping a conspiracy theory intact? Can you do all these things? Can you enforce all of these things? Maybe I could ask it this way. Is there anyone who can appraise and give absolute buy-in or benefit, who has an absolute implied threat, who has complete observation, knows what's going on at all times, and absolute enforcement? Besides God. Now we know God fits that paradigm. Is there any other agency that's able to do this? Our best governments are making a stab at it. All right, and there's a reason they're making a stab at it, because to have control at this level means you have absolute control of a population, or you can eliminate anybody who violates that control. But the only way I could see to actually bring about these things perfectly is to have a hyper-intelligent, hyper-connected, hyper-vigilant supernatural agency. Which means the only way you could get a really good conspiracy theory to work, or a really excellent secret society to flourish, is if you have either God behind it or some really high-ranking demonic power pulling the strings. Something for us to consider as we move on today. Let's talk about secret societies. I want to start tonight by talking about what is a secret society. Why would that have anything to do with a conspiracy? What is a secret society? How would you describe that? We don't know. It's a secret.
An organization whose practices or even their existence of is
Yeah, okay. So you got this organization. Its existence or its practices are kept secret. And those are really the two major features, right? There are some secret societies that don't want to be known, don't want to be heard of, and would rather be thought of as a myth. And there are other secret societies that are out there. You know that they're there, but then they try to keep their practices and their teachings and what transpires behind closed doors as a secret, right? That's a secret society. Now, by its nature, it's a secret, which means there's conspiracy going on, right? There are individuals who share knowledge, they share understanding, they're hiding things. Give me some examples of secret societies. Let's just start naming some. Naming names from the silly to the profound. What do you got? The Freemasons, one of the first ones that come up. What was it? Bilderbergers, right? Okay, others. Huh? Skull and Bones. Rosicrucians, good. Illuminati, one of the big ones, we think. All right. What's that? Cabal, all right. We're going to dip into a bunch of these. Some of these I'm going to bypass a little bit. There are significant other ones. There are secret societies behind the rise of the German Reich. There are secret societies that engage in all sorts of magical rituals and regulations. We'll try to tie into some of those as we start dipping into the occult. Oh, go ahead.
Would you consider certain religions that keep their practices, some practices secret, maybe not the whole thing, like Mormonism, Scientology, where they have some secretism?
Great question. You guys are familiar with Mormonism a little bit probably, right? You know that Mormons have a Mormon tabernacle, and they have all sorts of secret elements that take place within the Mormon tabernacle. Guess who was a Freemason? Joseph Smith. And Joseph Smith took a lot of the practices of Freemasonry out of Freemasonry and actually put together some version of that takes place in the Mormon tabernacle. If you've ever known any Mormons or had extensive discussions with Mormons, it's very fun. If they were married in the Mormon tabernacle, then they got special super secret underwear that they're not allowed to talk about, but it's very fun to try to make them talk about it. So like it's super secret underwear. They're never supposed to be without it. It's always supposed to be touching their body. Even if they're taking a shower or something else, they're supposed to or bath, they're supposed to keep it on one toe so that they never ever take it off. But they're not allowed to talk about it with outsiders, which makes it really tricky because Mormons also try not to lie. And so it's just a fun game to play with your Mormon friends. Anyway, but yes, a whole lot of secret society stuff tied in there. It's interesting. I was listening to, and this was not part of my session today, but I was listening to an avowed Satanist occultist who practiced witchcraft. A guy who was training for the priesthood eventually got shunted by a priest into Wicca. So the priest was pushing him into it because a lot of Wiccans and a lot of like true diabolical Satanists, like sincere demon worshipers, try to infiltrate the church. And so this guy got pushed into Wiccanism, and then he got pushed into Mormonism as a place to kind of conduct business. And he said that there were certain tells and everything else where you could identify other people who practice witchcraft within Mormonism, which I found fascinating. Anyway, that's an aside. There are a lot of secret societies. Some amount to absolutely nothing. All right, what was the Flintstones? What do you have, a Buffalo Lodge or something like that? All right. There are a number of like lodge type things where it's basically just an excuse for men to get together and drink beer and like shoot pool and hang out together. And there are some things like that might be entirely innocuous, some kind of just like local club. It's a substitute for men to have like a church family or something. But then there are other things that are truly diabolical. Well, let's kind of dig into some of the histories and origin of some of the secret societies. I'm going to start out, we're going to talk about Knights Templar, but before we do, let me just say this is something that was going on from the time of the first century and even before. So in ancient pagan phase, they had what were called the mystery religions. Mystery religions are where eventually we got groups like the Gnostics. Everyone say Gnostics. Okay. Have you ever wondered why the word know, like knowledge, has a K in front of it? Like that doesn't belong there. It's not knowledge. The reason that has that is because that came from the Greek word gnosis, which means knowledge, right? And there were these Gnostics, these people who believed that there was secret knowledge and that it could be attained through going through these mysteries. And so basically in the ancient world, one of these substitutes for a church experience for people was you had something like a haunted house where people would do a lot of drugs, and then they would basically go from room to room in this house of mysteries, and they would experience the mysteries. Like, ooh, touch the eyeballs. No, they're grapes without skin. But it was just this experience that was supposed to make people have these bizarre dreams and everything else. But those mystery religions, as Christianity emerged, a lot of these people tried to shift into Christianity and ended up becoming some of the major corruptions of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century. Because these Gnostics showed up and they went, I'm going to write a gospel from Peter. This is 200 years after Peter lived. What are you doing? I just got secret knowledge. That's not the way this works, right? And so this is how a lot of these secret societies kind of corrupted the church early on. But that was, even in ancient times, you had these groups that were gathering together, huddling together, sharing in these mysteries. Well, the Knights Templar emerged in the 1100s, and a lot of our modern secret societies try to connect themselves back to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were originally started with, I think it was 9 monk knights, which is awesome, right? So these were like guys who had devoted themselves to God, but also happened to be like incredible fighters. And so they basically took like a vow of poverty, and then they dedicated themselves to escorting pilgrims on their travels from Europe down to Jerusalem to see Jerusalem and the Holy Lands. And so these guys started like guarding these roads and making safe routes. And as the name of the Knights Templar began to emerge, everybody who was like of the warrior class was like, that's awesome, I want to be part of this group. And that's how they dress too. So you definitely want to be part of this group. I mean, that's cool, right? You got the cool bucket head. But they got to be very powerful, like to the point where they were like resolving conflicts internationally. But here's what they started doing that really changed things up. They knew that to travel on the road with money was dangerous. And so they created a banking system, the world's first international banking system. And so you established a place where you could get credits, and they could mark out these credits, and you could leave your money there, and it was safe because the Knights Templar had it. And when you got to another one of their fortresses, they could give you your money back because you had the secret code inscribed somewhere, and they would go, yes, you definitely have this amount, and then they would just hand you your money back. It was a safe way to get your money from Europe down into Jerusalem, or from Jerusalem back into Europe. And so these guys created the first banking system. And you know what happens when somebody creates a banking system? They get rich. And so the Knights Templar were trading, they were getting extensively rich. They were also trading in books, because one of the most valuable possessions you could get in the ancient world was a book. And so the Knights Templar began to accrue all sorts of scrolls, all sorts of mystical tomes, probably a lot of sorcerous material, and magic spells began to kind of be acquired, most likely. At least that's one of the charges against the Knights Templar. But they began to have so much wealth and so much power that as a military unit, they could threaten almost any nation that was on earth at that time. And they had so much wealth that they were loaning money to kings and nations. Sound like anybody you've heard of today? Right? Okay. Some of the worst actors on the world stage are still the ones who control the money and put it at the disposal of governments, to put governments at the disposal of these people. Well, in the ancient world, that didn't sit well with everybody. And the King of France at one stage of the game decided that he owed a ton of money to the Knights Templar. And so then he was just like, you know what? The Knights Templar are evil, and they're engaged in sorcery, and they're doing all kinds of horrific things. Was that true? Not sure. We don't know if that was happening. But the Pope was like, yeah, the Knights Templar are responsible for this. And the Pope and France, and then all the other nations who had Knights Templar, began burning these guys at the stake and killing them and collecting all of their stuff. And so all of these different nations and people group took all of the stuff that belonged to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were then on the run. So 2 possibilities here. Either what was said about them was true, and they had actually really gotten corrupted, or it could be maybe even partially corrupted, or it could be that the nations just turned on them, took all of their wealth, took all of their power, and just cast these guys to the wind rather than repaying debts.
Or they hid it on Oak Island.
Or they hid it on Oak Island. Yeah, another conspiracy. There is a thought that many of these guys, actually, many of the Knights Templar did not just go into hiding, but that some of them went into plying military trades on boats and eventually became what was known as buccaneers and pirates on the high seas, which is kind of an interesting idea. The thing is a lot of people claim to be ideological descendants or connected to the Knights Templar. We don't know that that's the case. The reason that people connect to them is because they're a secret society and they had all kinds of secrets, and you can make up anything about them. Ask Dan Brown. By the way, for those who were in ministry during the time that Dan Brown's books came out, I cannot tell you how obnoxious it was to keep answering questions about that stupid Da Vinci Code. It's false, it's fabricated, it's demonstrably false on 1,000 different levels. It's based on Gnostic heresies. It's based on proven Gnostic heresies. Yeah, but it's pretty compelling. Anyway, Knights Templar gives way to Freemasons. Let's talk about that.
Most mysterious secret societies with roots dating back to the late 16th or early 17th century. It likely evolved from medieval stonemason guilds, which were groups of skilled craftsmen who built Europe's great cathedrals. In 1717, the first Grand Lodge was established in London, marking the formal
Freemasonry.
organization of Freemasons.
This is one of the oldest and most mysterious secret societies, with roots dating back to the late 16th or early 17th century. It likely evolved from medieval stonemason guilds, which were groups of skilled craftsmen who built Europe's great cathedrals. In 1717, the first Grand Lodge was established in London, marking the formal organization of Freemasonry. Freemasons believe in a supreme being, often referred to as the great architect of the universe. They emphasize moral integrity, personal development, and the brotherhood of all people. Their teachings, conveyed through symbolic rituals and allegory, focus on living a virtuous life, promoting charity, and seeking truth. Freemasons meet in local lodges to conduct rituals, discuss moral and philosophical topics, and engage in charitable activities. Freemasonry is known for its secrecy and elaborate rituals, which have fueled numerous conspiracy theories over the years. The society's symbolic practices and exclusive nature contribute to its enduring mystique. Freemasonry continues to thrive today, with millions of members worldwide. Despite the secrecy, it remains a community dedicated to self-improvement, charity, and the preservation of its rich traditions.
Okay, let's talk about the Freemasons. So they were supposedly founded in London in 1717, but likely actually tied to genuine Masons who were the guys creating some of the Gothic cathedrals. You've ever seen Gothic cathedrals? I mean, just amazing architecture, amazing stonework. And the idea was a lot of these guys probably had very tight-knit circles where they shared some of their trade secrets to only their closest peers. But it got so tight and the nature of it was so powerful and influential that perhaps they became something more. There's another speculation here, and I'll just toss this one out, and it's that sometimes architecture and shapes can have actual magical power. We'll discuss that as we go on with the rest of what we're talking about tonight. Now, on the face, Freemasonry is simply a fraternal organization of lodges governed by a Grand Lodge. Usually it's drinking buddies getting together to do weird stuff, memorize things, shake hands in funny ways, have secret symbols, secret gestures that they engage in to identify one another. Do you know any of the particular images that they use to demonstrate that they're a Freemason? Anybody know? The square and compass is one of the major symbols that is used. Okay. Let me just show you a few things that will identify somebody as a Freemason. If somebody goes to shake hands and you see them only clasp the fingers of the hands like this, especially men, just finger to finger like this, that usually intones that they're either involved with the Freemasons or they are involved with a hierarchy beyond the Freemasons. Watch every major world leader shake hands the next time you see them together. They always grab fingers. Almost all of them. You very rarely see a guy grab hands like this. Now think about this, just men in general. Have you ever reached for somebody's hands and just grabbed their fingers with your fingers? Do Do you ever do that? Okay, as guys, that's an awkward thing. So it's really weird that people would do that at the highest levels. The other thing is what's called the all-seeing eye or the hidden eye. And the idea is if one eye is covered or a person winks the eye or keeps the eye closed on purpose. Sometimes you'll see people do this before they step up to talk somewhere. So like if a politician is ready to step up, sometimes you'll see them just close an eye for a second and then walk up. That's meant to be an indicator that I'm part of this particular secret society. They'll often do the hidden hand. I don't wear a sports coat, so this makes it hard. But you'll watch Anthony Fauci before he gets up and talks. He'll step up like this, and he sticks his hand into his coat pocket like this, and he looks around, and then he pulls it out and goes over and stands behind the microphone. That's called the hidden hand. The idea is I'm doing something. I'm sorry, I wasn't in front of a microphone. Can you guys hear me? I'm a moron. I keep thinking I'm like mic'd up. But the hidden hand is a way to sort of cover up and let you know that I'm part of another secret organization or a secret group. And then the most obvious one that you're going to see a lot of people doing throughout Hollywood and the media is doing this, which is I'm part of the Illuminati. It's making the pyramid shape, and you'll see that kind of all over the place right now. But for the Freemasons, it's the finger grasp generally, the closed eye or the covered eye, or the hand, the hidden hand, where they put it into a jacket. Now, you're not supposed to know that because you're not a member of the Freemasons. Why do we know that? Music videos. Yeah, there have been a number of Freemasons that have spilled the beans and have kind of come forth on some of the secret society stuff. One person knows the symbols and the hands gestures. You're going to see them everywhere. Now that I've told you those things, just start watching. Particularly when you're watching important people talk or do things, you're going to see this all over the place. And some of this, like, you might be thinking, well, that person's only reaching in their coat because maybe they've got note cards there for their speech. But if they reach in and they just stop and put their hand in their coat for no reason, and then they come out and they're not pulling out anything, that's intentional. Like somebody's doing that on purpose. You might, maybe 1 in like 100 might do that by accident or as nervous habit, but as many people as do it is a little bit strange. Okay. Many founders of the U.S. were Freemasons. If you've studied American history, you know this is true. Any guys ever been to Washington, D.C.? Okay, symbols of Freemasonry are everywhere in Washington, D.C. It's in all the architecture. You know what the Washington Monument is? It's an object called, we call it an obelisk. It's called a bin. I remember that. But it's an Egyptian symbol. It's something used in Egyptian culture. It's to symbolize the male phallus. And it's always set opposite a dome, which is to represent the womb. And so in Washington, and it's meant to represent Horus, or Isis and Horus giving birth to Osiris. Or do I have that wrong? Iris and Osiris giving birth to Horus. Is that right? Anyway, ancient Egyptian symbology. Why is that in Washington, D.C.? Why is that in the Vatican? There is a bin. Bin-bins are not part of Christian history. They're part of pagan ideologies. Why is that symbol, the phallus, opposite the womb, in the Vatican? That doesn't make any sense. And yet it's there. Yeah, Josh.
Is it true that church steeples find their roots in that as well?
They're not a specific bin. So the bin is a very specific object. It is a like, think of the Washington Monument. It is a pyramid atop a very long post. Which, by the way, now that I think about it, you've seen the things they've done with the pyramids where they've shown that there's probably substructure that goes down much, much deeper. I wonder if those are bin-bins. That would be weird. Okay, we're just going to leave that aside. Many famous Freemasons. Can anybody name some Freemasons? George Washington's a famous one. Benjamin Franklin, John Wayne, Homer Simpson. He was a member of the Stonecutters. That's right. George Bush. Yeah. A lot of so like Shaquille O'Neal, LeBron James are Freemasons. There are a lot of people who are active and vocal Freemasons. You'll sometimes just see them wearing either a ring with the square and compass on it, or you'll see them either with a tattoo or maybe like a necklace or something with a charm on it. But tons and tons of people throughout history, some known, some unknown. Freemasons claim to believe in a supreme being. They have a veneer of Christian friendliness that seems quite present at lower levels. And when I say a veneer of Christian friendliness, I mean like they'll pray together. They give Bibles to their members. So like if you become a Freemason, you'll get a Freemason Bible. It's the scriptures, and it's all put together, and they've got the square and compass on the front of it. It's pretty awesome, right? I don't know. Why would they do that? If they're not a Christian group, why would they do that? Catholic Church has openly opposed the Freemasons since 1738. You are not allowed to be Catholic and a Freemason. As one major obstacle to anyone who wants to be a Freemason, if you're a Catholic, you're not allowed in. They've declared them heretical and stand opposed to them, one would think, except why do they still have the symbology in the Vatican? It's really weird. If there was something more insidious going on in the ranks of Freemasonry, would you want Christians present? Would you? Why? Camouflage. Hey, if it's going to be a good conspiracy, if it's going to be genuinely covered up, you need to have a solid pretense of virtue. If you're doing something truly wicked behind the scenes, you want people to see something presented to them that is very good. What do the Freemasons spend their time doing? Got the Shriners, they donate tons of money, right? They're constantly doing charity work, right? It's required of their members that they do charity work. And so you have this general impression that these are good guys doing good things. There is a prevalent contention that at level 33, Mason, the 33rd degree of Mason, they are presented with what is known as the Luciferian doctrine. That is, they are told that the supreme being you have been worshiping the entire time is actually what we call the Satan, or the devil. That he is the supreme being who originally tried to set us free from God's tyranny, and he is the true architect trying to build a new path forward. That's interesting. I had a relative of mine, was the chaplain of the Ohio State Senate, and he was a level 32 Freemason. He never ascended to level 33. And if you listen to people who are in the know, they will tell you that any genuinely believing Christian will never be allowed into the rank of the 33rd degree. Fascinating. This contention, by the way, that the Luciferian doctrine is given to people at level 33 was set forth by Jim Shaw in 1988. William, I'm not even going to, Schnoebelon. Numerous other anonymous sources have come forth online and said the same thing. But of course, they remain anonymous. Why would they remain anonymous? It is genuinely dangerous to give some secrets, especially considering this. If there is a Luciferian doctrine at level 33, then that means there are probably legitimate ties to demonic agencies and demonic forces. And by the way, there's speculation, because what Freemasons will tell you is level 33 is the highest you can go. There are speculations that it goes even higher than that, but that's the beginning of the whole next phase. Kind of interesting stuff. What's the challenge with confirming or denying such claims? I should, by the way, say this. Only one of the U.S., there were 14 U.S. presidents who were known Freemasons. Only one was a level 33 degree Mason. Gerald Ford. Yeah, I don't know. Not sure what was going on there. What's the challenge with trying to confirm these claims? How do you prove that's true? You ask AI? Here's what the people who have apparently attained this degree and have said to people. They've said this is not written down anywhere. This has to be memorized person to person. They intentionally will not script any of these things so that no text of this could ever get out. Isn't that interesting? Now, many people will also say, oh, I did say this. Yeah, I guess I didn't do this one. All right, Gerald Ford. Yeah, so Gerald Ford was the one that I mentioned before. Okay, many people who study the occult connections to secret societies actually claim that the Freemasonry as a secret society is sort of the ground floor for all the other secret societies that are out there. So in other words, there are other secret societies that go in way deeper and way darker, and they recruit directly from the Freemasons. The whole idea of the Freemasons is they're kind of the ground level where you can get in and you can determine whether somebody can keep a good secret and is power hungry enough and is able and capable enough and should achieve some other status in another secret society. Yeah.
Quick question on the level 33, they're saying that the supreme being you've been worshiping is actually the devil.
Yes.
What's the likelihood that a Christian actually worships the devil unknowingly?
So what they'll say is you might have been, when we offer all these prayers, and by the way, if you pull out a dollar bill right now, you're going to see a whole bunch of Latin phrases all over your dollar bill. And some of them are explicitly, seemingly geared toward God. But then you'll see one like that's on the pyramid that says, in Latin, I believe it translates something like, he approves of our venture. He approves of our venture. And you're like, who approves of our venture? Well, clearly they must mean God, right? But the idea is that if you get the highest ranks of Freemasonry, they say, the person we've been referring to all the time is actually Lucifer. So it's the fallen or the serpent or the devil. And that's the one who we believe is the architect of the new way forward and the new path forward. And so what they'll say is, you might have thought you were praying to your other God, but all of our prayers are directed in this direction. So I guess at this stage of the game, so like no Christian will reach level 33. Because they'll look at that person and they'll be like, no, we just don't think you're the right material for it, because they know that person's life. They know what that person's about. The only way they're going to promote somebody that high is if they've actually seen them transgress or violate their conscience in ways where they go, this person moves on. And I'm saying this is speculation on my part. I don't know that this is the case. This is what is prevalent among people who apparently know. So take it for what it's worth, but let's look at the fruit of what comes next, and we'll see whether or not that would make sense. Do you know that George Washington talks about the Illuminati? Did you realize that? George Washington was a Freemason. And here's what he said. This was a big concern of his that he wrote about and apparently spoke to a lot of people about. This is one of his letters to G.W. Snyder, who I guess was a pastor, in 1798. Reverend Sir, I have read of your favor the 17th instant before me, and my only motive to trouble you with the receipt of this letter is to explain and correct a mistake which I perceive the hurry in which I'm obliged often to write letters to have led you into. Man, it's hard to read. It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism, yes, had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more fully satisfied of this fact than I am. In other words, George Washington is saying, I know that the Illuminati is trying to infiltrate our nubile country. That's in a letter. This is a documented letter from George Washington. The idea I meant to convey was I did not believe that the lodges of Freemasons in this county had, as societies endeavored to propagate, the diabolical tenets of the first or the pernicious principles of the latter. All right, the idea is, I know that there are groups trying to, I can see that you're concerned that the Freemasons have been infiltrated by the Illuminati, and the Illuminati are trying to control our government just like they're trying to control governments around the world. But I want you to know, I don't think they're involved with our Freemason lodges. George Washington was never a 33-degree Mason. Josh? Great question. I don't know. Look it up. It was some other pernicious group. It might be attached to one of the early founders of the Illuminati. We'll talk about the Illuminati here in just a moment. But I want you to see that the Illuminati is attached in its early phases to our country and to many other countries, perceived as through the Freemasons. And I'll explain to you in just a moment. Let's go ahead and watch a little snippet on the Illuminati.
The Illuminati. This is one of the most famous and controversial secret societies, often associated with conspiracy theories and clandestine global influence. It was founded on May 1st, 1776, in Bavaria, now part of Germany, by Adam Weishaupt, a professor of law. Originally called the Order of the Illuminati, it was established as a secret society aiming to promote Enlightenment ideals and challenge religious and political oppression. Weishaupt's vision was to create a network of like-minded individuals who could influence society through reason and secularism. The The order sought to advance knowledge, individual freedom, and reform against the religious and political constraints of the time. The original Illuminati promoted principles of rationalism, secularism, and the pursuit of knowledge. It was opposed to the influence of the church and the autocratic power of monarchies, advocating for a more enlightened and egalitarian society. In modern times, the term Illuminati is often used to refer to a supposed elite group that allegedly manipulates global events from behind the scenes. These theories suggest that the Illuminati seeks world domination and control over political and financial systems, though these claims are not supported by evidence. In its early days, the Illuminati engaged in covert meetings and used secret codes and rituals to promote its ideas among influential members of society. The group sought to recruit influential individuals in various sectors to advance its goals. The Illuminati was suppressed and disbanded by the Bavarian government in 1785, just 9 years after its founding. The suppression was driven by fears that the society was involved in subversive activities and conspiracies. Despite its brief existence, the Illuminati has become a central figure in numerous conspiracy theories. These theories often portray the group as a shadowy organization controlling global events. The enduring allure of the Illuminati in popular culture reflects widespread fascination with hidden power and secret societies.
Okay, so the Illuminati lasted only 9 years, according to this ideology. It emerges in Belgium, and it starts flourishing to the point that it's taking over world governments and subverting world governments. Here's what the Illuminati did. They apparently infiltrated Freemason guilds all over the world. And that was their objective. They sent people out to be stationed within Freemason guilds, and the idea was, we're going to take over the world, and we're going to eliminate the power and control of religions. And did you hear them say that they wanted equity and reason? You know what they meant by equity and reason? We want control of everything. All right, and so after 9 years, the Belgian government tries to shut them down. Now, here's what we know. They continued to spike up in plots throughout the next several decades, and then they seemed to go a little bit dark. But do you know what their mission was, their primary mission? To infiltrate the world's governments. Do you think that they're actually going to stop? Or do you think they would just go, you know what? How about we just work behind closed doors? Or how about we change the name of our society? Or how about we infiltrate other societies and just continue on with what we're doing? We're powerful people who can nudge the course of world events. Why should we stop doing what we're doing? If the objective is world dominance, do you want to be seen or unseen? Yeah. I mean, ultimately, the hidden hand is the one that does more. The hidden hand is the one that gets away with things. And so it makes sense that the Illuminati would have gone dark, that they would have gone underground. So if they went underground, if they were renamed, if they co-opted other promising young rising stars, if they were setting out to provide paths of power and influence to loyal members, meanwhile shunting aside anyone who was not loyal to the group, how would you go about doing that? Is there any organization in our modern world that tries to grab people from the base level of society and go, you're promising, come be part of what we're doing. How about you come to our conference? Oh, we're gonna put you into a place of political power, and you're president. Ever seen anything like that happen? Have you ever seen people pick winners and losers on the economic world stage based on their connection to a particular group? Ever heard of the World Economic Forum? Or the Bilderberg Group? Do you know that people in the Bilderberg Group and a lot of these young leaders conferences, those people go to the conferences and suddenly those people find themselves as heads of state in major positions of power. They were nobody a few years ago. Do you know how quick Obama's rise was? You know that he went to a Bilderberg meeting before he started attaining any kind of level of status. Almost like he was selected to do it. Now again, I'm not saying that's Illuminati. I'm just saying whatever principles the Illuminati had in play seem to be moving forward still, even if they're not there, maybe through another group. Let's talk about another group.
And bones. This is one of the most enigmatic and elite secret societies in the United States, founded in 1832 at Yale University. The society was established by William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft as a way to bring together a select group of influential students. The society is known for its exclusivity, admitting only 15 new members, known as Bonesmen, each year. Membership is typically offered to Yale seniors who are seen as future leaders in various fields, including politics, business, and law. Over the years, many bonesmen have gone on to hold significant positions of power, including U.S. presidents, senators, and Supreme Court justices. Skull and Bones is notorious for its secrecy. The society conducts its meetings in a windowless building known as the Tomb on the Yale campus. Inside, members participate in mysterious rituals, many of which are rumored to involve bizarre oaths, symbolic gestures, and elaborate ceremonies that have fueled countless conspiracy theories. One of the most peculiar aspects of Skull and Bones is the level of influence its members are said to wield. Conspiracy theories suggest that Bonesmen are part of a shadowy network that controls key institutions and shapes global events. While these theories remain unproven, the Society's reputation for producing powerful and influential alumni keeps the myth alive.
Okay, so maybe that's just Skull and Bones. It could just be that this is just a Yale thing and this is just like a fraternity. But a whole lot of people affiliated with this particular group end up in major positions of power throughout the world. But big deal, why are we talking about this? I mean, couldn't it be just that these are power-hungry people connecting with other power-hungry people to make sure that they and their offspring stay in positions of power throughout the rest of their lives? Sure, that might be the case. Only it seems a little bit nefarious, especially when we get to this part. Let's talk about the Rosicrucians.
The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, commonly known as the Golden Dawn, was a secret society founded in London in 1887 by 3 Freemasons, William Robert Woodman.
Go ahead and skip past that one real quick. We're gonna come back. I sent you another one, but I think you probably got it downloaded before it happened. Well, we'll just do this. Let me tell you about the Rosicrucians really quickly. Apparently, according to the traditions, the year that the Knights Templar disappeared, the Rosicrucians appeared on the scene. Rosicrucians are around to this day. Right? These are individuals who apparently practice secret rituals, much like the Freemasons, but they're a lot more secret than the Freemasons are. And they're also involved in a lot more things that we would call magic or practices of magic than the Freemasons are. They're a lot more friendly with what we would call witchcraft. Well, the Rosicrucians appeared on the scene pretty early on, apparently, but here's what we know about them. As we were kind of heading into sort of past the Middle Ages and into the Enlightenment period, the Rosicrucians became prominent, and when they became prominent, their practices people started becoming aware of their practices. That they were engaged in things like scrying, and they were engaged in things like summoning rituals. The Rosicrucians had some of their documents that emerged at some stage of the game, and in their documents were instructions on how to abort a baby. And it was written in invisible ink, which is a little strange. Why would an order of men have something like that going on in it? It's almost like it was a sacrifice ritual or something. Rather strange. Anyway, the Rosicrucians, a lot of good people were Rosicrucians, though. You have the same kind of situation with the Freemasons, where you have a lot of people who don't seem to know some of the darker traditions. So people like René Descartes, who was a brilliant philosopher, Blaise Pascal, who was a phenomenal Christian, were considered Rosicrucians because they were interested in things like alchemy and science. And so a lot of scientists attached to the Rosicrucians. You're going to see this weird transition where the occult and science start kind of mingling as time progresses. And you get scientists who are occultists and occultists who are scientists. Let's go ahead and start talking about the occult here. Go ahead and play that video you had pulled up earlier.
The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, commonly known as the Golden Dawn, was a secret society founded in London in 1887 by 3 Freemasons, William Robert Woodman, William Wynne Scott, and Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers. It is one of the most influential organizations in the development of Western occultism and modern magic. The Golden Dawn was dedicated to the study and practice of the occult, metaphysics, and paranormal activities. Its teachings were a blend of various esoteric traditions, including Hermeticism, Kabbalah, astrology, alchemy, tarot, and geomancy. Members progressed through a series of grades, each representing a deeper level of mystical knowledge and spiritual development. Members of the Golden Dawn engaged in elaborate rituals, meditation, and magical practices designed to achieve personal transformation and spiritual enlightenment. The order placed a strong emphasis on the use of symbols and ritual magic to connect with divine forces and to bring about changes in the material and spiritual worlds. It also influenced many later occultists and magical societies, including notable figures like Aleister Crowley and Israel Regardie. The original Golden Dawn disbanded in the early 20th century due to internal conflicts, but its teachings and rituals have continued to influence modern esoteric and magical traditions.
Okay. We're We're going to dip into the Golden Dawn here in just a moment and talk about how influential they became as things progressed. But this is the idea. As you kind of get deeper and deeper in layers of secret societies, you'll find that a lot of these people start engaging in what we would traditionally describe as necromancy or some kind of demonic sorcery or summoning rituals. John chapter 3, verse 19 through 21. This is the judgment, that the light has come into the world, and that men have loved the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light, and does not come into the light for fear that his deeds will be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifested as having been wrought in God. The question is, why do people hide things? Why do people do things in secret, and why do people love the darkness? Some of your parents, you ever tell your kids that old phrase, nothing good happens after midnight, right? The idea is that the deeds of darkness are described as the deeds of darkness for a reason. When people think that they're not being seen, when people think their deeds are being concealed, then sometimes they do exceedingly wicked things. It's interesting that in the world God created, one of the best disinfectants in the world is sunlight. Expose it to the light. Kills all the gross stuff, right? It's like it's just built into the world. Things that happen in the darkness.
Rosicrucians.
Well,
The
we won't do
Rosicrucians are a
Rosicrucians.
mystical and philosophical movement that emerged in the early 17th
Yeah, go ahead
century.
and stop it. I meant to put the Rosicrucians earlier, so we'll leave that aside for right now. We'll get into some of this darker stuff anyway. I want to hit this before we're done. The Order of the Golden Dawn, this group is where things turn utterly dark. So at their entry levels, when you first join this order, you're taught, okay, so here's the deal. Magic is a real thing. And you can do things in this world that will give you extensive power, but you have to make some sacrifices. And so they begin initiating people in the order, and they run them through principles first. They'll talk about something like scrying. Does anybody know what scrying is? Yeah, do you? Sure. Okay. So scrying in general, the idea of scrying is you're going to find something that is hidden or look at somebody in a way that they can't observe you. So you'll remember, like in the story of Joseph, when Joseph said, hey, that was my scrying cup. He meant that was the cup I looked into to see things that are hidden. All right. There are probably a lot of people throughout biblical history who did practice some really weird things, because not a lot of these things were outlawed. But a lot of these people did, for instance, you'd look into a mirror or a flat surface or a glass surface or a piece of obsidian or crystal, and you'd stare into it, and often this was accompanied with drug use or something else, and you would engage in rituals that would help you to see things that you normally couldn't see. Do you know who's interested in seeing things from great distances and seeing them unobserved? Our government is. Which is why our government was heavily involved in this stuff when they first began thinking that possibly you could see things through scrying images or scrying mirrors. You have to investigate that. You know, our government has to workshop every idea, right? Like your Defense Department has to go, if it's possible that there's something here, then we have to role play that, and we have to see whether or not there's something to be investigated. So when it comes to the occult, you can pretty much be guaranteed that our government has tried almost everything that's out there. We know that our government has engaged in astral projection. Does anybody know what astral projection is? Okay, yeah, it's considered an out-of-body experience. It's when you leave your body. If you've seen the show Stranger Things, that's the idea of astral projection. It's when you can leave and go through another realm and go and see something far off. So our government did extensive testing with astral projection. That is a matter of history now. We know, those files, many of these files have been released, not all the files, but a number of these files have been released. The Order of the Golden Dawn taught how to do this. Here's how you leave your body, and here's how you depart and go mingle with other things that are out there. And then they taught elemental practices. Here's how you control the elements or use the elements in order to experience something beyond yourself. Here's how you mind control. Do you think our government might be interested in that? Here's how you manipulate the psychology of people. Here's how you instill fear in a population or a person, right? And so mind control aspects got mingled into this as well. And so as this progressed then, this individual named Aleister Crowley came along, and he got affiliated with this group. We'll talk about the meshing of those two lives in just a moment. Let's talk about the backdrop of Aleister Crowley. Most of you probably heard of Aleister Crowley, if not from an Ozzy Osbourne song. Somewhere you've probably heard of him. He is prevalent on the music scene, or was prevalent on the music scene, as being referenced by many people. He is one of the, as far as a person of interest in Hollywood and among elites, this guy, hello, officer. You looking for somebody or anything? Okay. Just want to make sure. But he's one of these individuals who, in the course of world history, has way more reputation, way more insight, and way more, following than you would expect a person of his caliber to have experienced. So this individual rose up to prominence as a young man, very troubled. Let me just say this. He did things as a child and as a teenager that were so horrific that I will not mention them here. Like blasphemous, awful things. He had parents who were heavily involved in the church, and he did everything he could to offend them on the most deep levels imaginable. His mother began calling him the Beast as a child. And when you hear the stuff that he was doing, you could probably understand why. He self-described as the wickedest man in the world. That's how he would project himself to others. And he set about with intention to try to cross every line he could possibly cross as a human being. If you can think of something as a sin, he has investigated. He's done something there. Yeah, Emmy. I think that's one of the possibilities that some people have propagated. I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't know about that. I would not be even a little bit surprised. I have no doubt that this man murdered people. I have no doubt that this man committed atrocities against children that you cannot imagine. If you read his writings, if you read some of the things he said of himself or of others, you get the sense that that was a definitive desire of this guy. And it's not that he didn't believe in a God. He believed that he was crossing those lines and that that was a good thing or a virtuous thing. He went to Oxford University, and when in Oxford University, he began to use their libraries to just dive into the occult and study deeply the occult. And so he got heavily involved in the occult at this stage of the game, began studying, looking for spells, anything else that he could find that would attach him to ancient dark rituals or practices. And as you can imagine, Oxford University, being an ancient university, probably had a lot of connections in that regard. Well, Crowley joined the Golden Dawn in 1898. Quickly progressed through all of their established ritual magic. He did very well as he was engaged with them, to the degree that he mastered everything they had pretty quickly. In the highest levels of the order, he was like, now I want to go there. And when I say he mastered what they had, I mean he could perform every magic spell that they had better than their best people. He could drop curses, and they came into effect almost immediately. Very powerful. He decided he wanted to be at the highest level. They said, no, you have not earned that right yet, and not to mention you're volatile, and we're a little bit afraid of you. And so he promoted himself to the highest level. And they're like, you're out of here, buddy. And then he went ahead and published all of their secret arts. And when he published their secret arts in his magazine, they had a decent reputation up to this point. They were seen as sort of this occultic society. A lot of nobles in England participated with this group. And they had kind of a good reputation as the good bad guys, as white witches. When he published what they were doing, it became evident that they were engaged in all sorts of blood rituals and conjurings of demonic spirits. They were actively summoning creatures to do their bidding. And the church went, whoa. And a lot of people who were participating with this group were like, I'm out, I'm done. But a lot of people who knew what they were doing stuck with it. The Golden Dawn at that stage of the game, I should say this, they turned on one another, they broke apart, they turned on one another, and there was a series of wizard battles in England where they were cursing each other, and they were all claiming to be the true inheritors of what was transpiring there. But this is full-on paganism, witchcraft type stuff, and they maliciously went after each other and tried to destroy each other. It's really strange stuff. All right. So 1900, Crowley was expelled from the Golden Dawn. In the spring of 1904, Crowley's life got really weird. Not that it wasn't weird already. 1904, he was honeymooning in Cairo with his wife, Rose. Rose was not terribly interested in most of the occultic things he was doing. Of course, she participated with him because she had to, because that's part of how you deal with Aleister Crowley's life. Well, when they got into Cairo, she was not terribly interested in anything, but then she just took on a different demeanor entirely. And she said that Horus had spoken to her. That Horus, at this day, and by the way, he was there to do sex magic. Crowley was there to do sex magic in the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid. That's how lax Egypt was. Like, you give them enough money at that stage in history, I guess you could do whatever. And that's why he and Rose were here. She said Horus spoke to her and said that he had a message for Crowley, and Crowley was not allowed to leave the hotel room for the next 3 days so that he could come and speak to Crowley. Crowley didn't believe her. He's like, that didn't happen, because she'd never done anything or said anything like that. So then she kind of trance-like walked him through the city to a museum, walked him through the museum to an obelisk that was marked Exhibit 666, and then she pointed at the obelisk and translated it. And apparently it directed him to go back to this or it directed him to say like that he would receive some kind of word of the law. So he went back to his hotel, and he said, I guess, in the hotel room, he then experienced a creature that came to him and identified itself as Awas. And he said it spoke to him from above his left shoulder in a dominating, aggressive tone, and it began speaking to him and directing him as to what he should do. And he received from it what he called the law. That became one of the principal features of like occultic practice to this day. And so this is a major work of occultism, 220 verses that Crowley apparently translated and put into this book he called the Law. That's used by Wiccans to this day for practicing dark rituals.
But
here's where things get really weird
the
with Crowley.
craziest part. Crowley's strangest and possibly most important magical experiment came in 1918 during his time in New York. It was called the Amalantra, or the Amalantra working. This was a series of rituals he designed to make contact with non-human intelligence. He did this by using a mix of sex magic, psychedelic states, and ceremonial invocations. Crowley intentionally aimed to open a doorway between these worlds, and according to him, it worked, where something came through. And that something was Lamb, L-A-M. And the weird part is when Crowley sketched Lamb based off of what he saw during the rituals, this is what he drew. Now, what's strange about this image on the screen is that it kind of resembles like a gray, what people would describe like an alien as. But what's interesting is that this was done in 1918. The earliest depictions of the grays that we sort of know come post-World War II. They come really with the abduction of Benny and Barney Hill. And that is really when this idea of like these, big-headed, big-eyed alien things really comes into the fold. And so the idea that he would draw this in 1918 stands out as, a pretty strange way to describe this non-human intelligence that he spoke with. So again, you can see this oversized head, you got these strange sort of eyes, this small mouth and nose. And again, this was 1918, decades before Roswell, Betty and Barney Hill in the 1960s, before Aliens or E.T. or Spielberg, any of these people actually put these ideas into the cultural zeitgeist. And Crowley didn't call Lamb an alien, right? He called it a preternatural intelligence, his words. Something that existed outside of normal reality, acting as a gatekeeper between dimensions.
Okay, did you hear what he just said? Okay, so this happened before the Greys were a known thing. He had this summoning ritual, an elaborate summoning ritual in New York. And in this particular summoning ritual, by the way, some of the biggest occult movements in American history came out of New York and the burned over district during this time period. So modern spiritist movement, all kinds of weird stuff pops out of New York. Anyway, what you have is you have this thing that looks like Megamind. It actually does look impressively like a gray alien. And he said he doesn't call it an alien. He calls it a preternatural intelligence. In other words, I contacted something from another dimension, it opened a gateway, and it came through. And the story that he tells is that that gateway remained open. And that to this day, that gate is open. You know when we started seeing all those UFOs? It was within the following decades that all this UFO stuff started happening. Now, I found this utterly fascinating. The idea, because there are many people, again, we talked about this in the abduction stuff last week. There are many people who describe their demon possession issues in similar ways to what people describe as alien abductions. And so you think about this, and it could be that he did create a working that did open a gateway between two realms that did let demonic influences through. It might be that most of the UFO stuff that everybody's seeing right now are in fact just demonic workings that kind of began with Crowley. Anyway, Crowley burned himself out and killed himself with drugs. A lot of these people do. He tied drug and ritual abuse and drug abuse, and like he was serious about it. Like they tried everything in different doses, in different combinations, with fasting. And I mean, this was not a like let's just party type thing. It was a let's get serious, involve blood and all these other bodily fluids, and eat these things and drink these things, and get these results. Crowley influenced another individual. It's important in American history. Have you heard of Jack Parsons before? Jack Parsons is the co-founder of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Jack Parsons was a literal rocket scientist and one of the best rocket scientists in the history of the world. If we did go to the moon, Jack Parsons is the reason we went to the moon. It was his rocket fuel that apparently allowed that to be possible. Now, this is just an interesting idea I thought of. In the event we did go to the moon, and they keep saying, like, we can't go back, we don't have the technology anymore, we forgot how, which we all find very fascinating. What if it was actually an occultic practice that let them get there? Just an idea I'd like to toss out. Anyway, Jack Parsons was a literal rocket scientist. He was a devoted occultist. And when I say devoted, I mean the guy would work during the day blowing things up and then would, in the evenings, have elaborate rituals. He called his house the parsonage. His coworkers said he just knew things. Like when he was creating explosives, like he just knew the right amount of everything to add. He knew to reserve things in certain proportions, and they were like, it was like this preternatural knowledge was always with him about how things would work. He saw the use of magic as a great benefit in discovery. In fact, he said of his most productive lab, the place where he did the most discovery, that it was a portal, and that's the reason he chose it, and that's the reason NASA bought it. Any of you guys ever watched Skinwalker Ranch? We've mentioned this before, right? If you do watch Skinwalker Ranch, who owned Skinwalker Ranch for a while? Do you remember? Bigelow Enterprises. Through the U.S. government was doing experimentation there because of portals. Because they were investigating supernatural phenomena on the dime of the United States government in that territory, in that place. Now, it completely makes sense when you think, again, the idea that most people have in our country is science and then all the religious weirdo occultist stuff. Bring those hands together. Our government has definitely been in bed with this stuff and devoted to this stuff and experimenting with this stuff for a long time. But they're probably not doing it now, right? Here's the thing, like some of these people, and this is one of the things that just really struck me as I was studying this, kind of gearing up for this over the last 2 weeks. Some of these people threw their lives away invested in this stuff. Like to the degree that they don't even look like they're getting a lot out of it, but man, they're involved in it and they can't step away and they can't quit. And you have to ask yourself, why would anybody do that if this was just a bunch of like people dressing in dark robes and playing pretend in the graveyard? That's not why you would do it. The only reason people pursue this stuff is because it works. And you might be thinking, Well, that's cool. How come we don't have stuff that works? We do. And more than having stuff that works, here's what we have. We have stuff that they cannot budge or penetrate. We have an effectiveness against them that means they can't even do this stuff in our presence. And you'll recall when we talked about Hugh Ross the other week, going into that auditorium in Russia, and all those people falling down in the fetal position and cowering and crying out and cursing. That was a result of a Christian walking into a room full of people who had all sorts of occultic power. Right? God does not want you to fear these things. God does not want you to be concerned about these things. We have more power here. Oh, is it Colton? Yeah. It's just Colton. I'm sorry. I should have told you he was back there.
We just saw a head poke up and go back.
I'm glad you guys didn't shoot my son. Thank you. Yeah, Colton had to come tonight because we had nobody else to watch him at home. And so he gets to play the Switch in the back the whole time because he would get spooked if he heard any of these things we're talking about. So yeah. But yeah, glad you didn't kill my son. All right. So Parsons died at 37 years old. How did he die? Probably murdered. He engaged in a lot of sex magic with other people's wives. He also was doing things and being very vocal about what he was doing in terms of the occultic practices that the government maybe would have liked him to have been quiet about. And so he died from an explosion in his lab. Some people have said he died because he was just crazy. His group of his inner circle was called the Suicide Squad because they worked with explosives that were so dangerous. But probably he was murdered. All right. Parsons famously engaged in a Thelemic ritual meant to bring forth the whore of Babylon, the Scarlet Woman from the book of Revelation. Get those earbuds back in, bud. Literally, he was trying to summon Babylon as we read in the book of Revelation. That was his intention. And Crowley was helping him in that working. And so the two of them were going back and forth, and they have missives between the two of them as that was going on. And apparently at some stage of the game, Jack Parsons was on a bus and saw a woman with red hair and was like, I summoned her. It's the Scarlet Woman. He was just really into this gal and decided that she must be the woman that he had summoned. And so went after her great guns. Parson represents a definitive link between the United States government and occultic experimentation. We know that the Soviets were really engaged with occultic experimentation. Scott, do you remember the name of that Fibonacci sequence structure? Josh, do you remember the name of it? Oh. There's a Y-Files. You guys ever watch the Y-Files? No? Okay, watch the Y-Files. It's fun. Not particularly Christian, but it has some really interesting stuff on it. Y-Files on YouTube. There is one, and it begins with an S, but I cannot remember the name of it. The Russians were engaging in experimentation with a metallic-shaped Fibonacci sequence, like that formed a room that you could get into. And getting into that room, then they would have people like get into that position, and they'd begin meditating and trying to engage in some occultic rituals, and they were getting all kinds of crazy success going in there and doing those things. I guess the plans for this thing are online. Don't look them up, and don't build one of these for yourself. But people would be in there, and like people were like different people. So when they first built this thing, all of a sudden UFOs started appearing all over the place in the region. And 7 different types of UFOs were seen in this territory in Russia. And then when people first got into the room that contained this particular structure, they were just collapsing at the edge of the room without the energy to move any closer to it, like paralyzed by it. They eventually started getting to the point where they could move into the inner portion of this, and different people started reporting seeing symbols in the air, and they were very clear here. They were not seeing hallucinations or dreaming of images. They said symbols were appearing in the air, actual symbols, and they were writing them down and drawing them, and they were all reporting the same symbols, though there were different people seeing them. Those symbols happened to be Sumerian, most of them, which is a little strange. And then they encountered things, faceless beings that were like, they would go into this other realm, and the thing would be like, how did you get here? And then they would go back to Earth. All sorts of bizarre stuff. Anyway, watch it. It's fun. Did anybody find the name of that thing? Ugh. Huh? No. Began with an S, I think, but I can't remember the name of it. Very fun watch. Anyway, the great thing about Y-Files is, and if you want to watch this, Y-Files starts out telling you the story as profoundly disturbing as it can be, with all of the details you're likely to encounter on the internet, and then it gets to the end and he's like, but is this true? And then he debunks most of it. But there's a lot of stuff that he's like, yeah, can't debunk that. And so, kind of a fun watch. So Y-Files, go sink yourself into that for a little while. It's a lot of fun. Kozarev. Yeah, it started with an S, right? Kozarev. My brain is mush. Let's talk Anton LaVey. We got to wrap up here. Anton LaVey, 1930 to 1997. This guy claimed, he was a founder of the Church of Satan in 1966. He claimed to have worked for a carnival, claimed to have had an affair with Marilyn Monroe, has all these braggadocious claims about how his life worked, and in his dark carnival experiences, he gained all these occultic powers and practices. He published the Satanic Bible in 1969. LaVey claimed to have been an atheist, though. If you actually deal with most Satanists in our culture, they don't believe in a God and they don't believe in a devil. Did you know that? Their version of Satanism is they believe that Satan represents the best possible kind of life. Satan is an entity that rejects God, and that's who we are. We're an entity that rejects God and rejects authority and just does what we want. Do what you want. What a great concept. That, by the way, is the central phrase in the Golden Dawn. Do as you will. Right? Okay. So anyway, Anton LaVey claimed to be an atheist. However, in practice, he did a whole lot of really dark stuff that made it look like he really did not function as an atheist. He was actually drinking blood and performing magical rituals. He had a house in San Francisco that was painted completely black, and he had a leopard that he would take out on walks through the city and mess with people's minds. He took his 3-year-old daughter and he devoted her to Satan in a baptism at 3 years old. So whatever else he is, he's not a good dad. A couple of his daughters would later on write about his life, and they would say he was highly, highly abusive. That he was abusive of all of them and everyone in the house. He was a wife beater and just a mean-spirited person in general. Surprise, the Satanist is not a good husband. LaVey became very popular with Hollywood elites. He spent considerable amounts of time in Hollywood. You guys know Sammy Davis Jr. was a Satanist? Some of you might be familiar with that. Some of you might be like, really? The Rat Pack guy? Yeah, Sammy Davis Jr. actually got caught out on camera a few times talking about Satanism. Like he was just being very casual, and he's like, yeah, it's a good time. Go hang out with your friends, meet with some chicks, do some drugs, and, worship Satan. It's a lot of fun. And he was like, are you serious? And he's like, no, I was talking about, but yeah, he was friends with Anton LaVey. And so he used to do those kinds of things. A number of Hollywood types kind of got involved in it, and many people in the music industry began getting involved in Satanism during this time period. And so many people in the music industry began tying in with Aleister Crowley and all of what Crowley was doing. And many people in the music industry began to believe that you could in fact engage with Wiccan practices and make your music more popular. And to this day, that apparently happens. Do you remember Taylor Swift? I might disappoint some people. Taylor Swift is a Wiccan, right? All right, she's one of many people who actually practices Wiccan practices and apparently casts spells through and in her songs and during her recording sessions. I had a friend who was selling beverages at the Taylor Swift concert when she was in Cincinnati last time, and he was like, it was weird in there. It's like all these people were like hypnotized. He's like, they didn't look right. They weren't functioning right. And again, this is just an anecdote from a friend I know who happened to be there. But in the context of that, he was just like, it was bizarre. And sometimes you'll have people coming out of those concerts going, I don't remember anything that happened, which is also a little strange. But if you start watching for the pagan symbolism and occultic symbolism with a lot of people in the music industry, you're going to find that all over the place. I used to think this was just like stuff that like heavy metal bands used to do just to like mess with parents so the kids would buy their albums. Because, you know, that's the way that worked, right? It's like if your parents hate it, then you must like it, or you might go, why do my parents hate this? And so then you go looking for it. And you guys were probably all part of the churches, you know, for those of you who were in churches back in the 80s, where you had the guys coming in talking about backmasking and playing records backwards, and you're like, see, it just said such and such. You're like, that's not what I heard. But it was a big thing for a little while there. The truth is, if witchcraft and actual paganism is involved in the music industry, it's probably involved at a much deeper level than just like they recorded songs that say weird things backwards. Probably more at a level where there's just something fundamentally pulling people away from God. Regardless, be careful with the music out there. Goodness. Occultic practices, though, do persist to this day also in Hollywood. One of the things that you'll particularly hear people step up and say when they're getting awards in Hollywood is you'll see them do the hidden hand, or you'll see them close an eye for a moment, or you'll see them do you got it, they're doing the Baphomet symbol. All right, so if you see somebody doing this or this, or that, you know, they're just doing this as they're talking, that's the symbol of Baphomet. Have you seen the Baphomet statue? Okay, Baphomet is a symbol supposedly of the devil, or it might be of a goat demon, or what was traditionally represented as the goat demon. But it travels the country, and the Baphomet statue gets set up in Capitol buildings all over the country, and will make the rounds, and you can go experience it and worship it. And they particularly set it up hoping that Christians will come make a fit about it so it can get on the news so they can sue somebody. You're part of the local school districts in our area. Did you have the Satan Club in your school? Had it in Lebanon. I think we had it in Little Miami. Satanist Club they put together for an after-school program for the kids. What are they looking for there? Attention and a lawsuit. What they want is a school to say, you can't do that, and them to go, you can't have Christian groups at your school then, and either shut down the Christian groups or get a lawsuit against the school. And so the schools have to let them come in. And what, by the way, if you're a Christian, just let this go down. Talk to your kids about what's going on, because pretty much nobody's going to turn out to those things, and they diminish almost instantly if you don't pay attention to them. But they're looking for people to just get attention. They want people to raise Cain as much as possible. So don't give in to them. Don't take the bait. But that's what they're after there. Witchcraft is probably... Sandy, were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, years ago, we were talking about the occult and everything in the life squads and fire departments.
Yeah.
And a couple of us went to Dayton for a seminar. Mm-hmm. And we were afraid to drive home with everything that we learned.
Yeah.
And we wanted to talk to the teachers.
Yeah.
And none of the teachers would come. They said, we don't have a problem.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we tried, and they would not come.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you'll hear from a lot of people, particularly like investigators, like crime scene investigators oftentimes, about the stuff that they find there and how often it has occultic ties, but it never makes the news.
just little signals or, like
Yeah.
the way they wear their clothes or any little thing.
Yeah.
And signs that they read. That's not a call according to teachers or.
Right. Yeah.
But it's worse around than they think.
Oh, yeah. It's dark stuff, and it is prevalent. Now, we are in a culture now where people are openly practicing paganism to a large degree. One of my favorite students to ever come through my youth group first came to my youth group as a witch. She was a practicing Wiccan, the daughter of a Wiccan, who was the daughter of a Wiccan, who was the daughter of a Wiccan. So multi-generation witchcraft in her family. Came to our youth group one time. She seemed to be okay with some of what was said, got a little disturbed with some of what was said, then went to a philosophy club that was being hosted at their local school by one of our students, and got so offended in that she ran out crying. And the guy who was running the philosophy club came in and was like, did I drop the ball? Like, what should I have done something differently? I'm like, you did a great job. It was Chad McIntosh, you guys might remember him. He's like, should I have done something different? I'm like, you did exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Well, then she came to the youth group. And then she came again to the youth group. And then she eventually got baptized and rejected all of that. But we got a lot of behind-scenes stuff from her just in general. She ended up going to Bible college and has been pretty active in churches ever since. But she used to say, like, if you go to the Renaissance Fair and you're wearing, a Wiccan symbol, like, they're selling the ridiculous stuff out front, but if they see you wearing a Wiccan symbol, they'll be, you want to see our spells? They'll take you in the back and they'll sell you like spellcraft stuff. And she's like, that's all over the place. Like, the Rennie Festival is like one of the major connection hubs for that. If you've ever gone to the Renaissance Festival and thought, well, this is fun, I like being insulted. Lay on, oh rab catcher. Or, I like eating a turkey leg. The Rennie Festival has a front and then it has a back. And the backside of the Renaissance Festival is a whole lot of drug use and drug sales and a lot of witchcraft and sorcery type stuff. So it's pretty dark. And they'll take a lot of money from you for what's not a lot of entertainment. After hours stuff, yeah. Oh yeah, you knew some people who were also affiliated with it, for sure. Yeah. But occultic stuff is real and live. By the way, most of that stuff stays under wraps because if people think it's ridiculous, it succeeds better. If the average person is like, that's stupid, that stuff's not real, you've been watching too many movies. That's the kind of person who's never going to be into it. But there is a type of person who is utterly fascinated with it and wants to know what it really says and what's really transpiring, right? That's a person who's going to dig in. So that was a whole lot all at once, and there's a whole lot more we did not even begin to touch on. Questions, comments, engagement, things you want to talk about?
A warning not to do a lot of extensive research on your own.
Yeah. Scott says a warning not to do extensive research on your own. Getting too involved and too engaged in this stuff can also elicit some attention from people who are involved in this stuff. So seeking it out might get you on a government list, I don't know. Might get you on a list of prospective clients, I'm not sure. But I would say be careful with it. I mean, this stuff is real. I can tell you it is absolutely real. Demonic agencies are real. If you've been in the church for any amount of time or a long period of time, and by the way, I should just say this because I found out a few weeks ago that somebody was struggling with something and never came to us because they just didn't know what to do. If you've got like really spooky things going on at your house, like, and when I say spooky things, like if you got stuff flying off the walls, or if you walk into a room and something's like standing up on a table and then it falls down when you walk into a room, or like you're hearing voices in different languages or something, please come talk to us. Like, we can deal with that stuff. Like, you don't have to live with that. But like, I'm amazed sometimes because some people are newer to the church and maybe they just don't have experience with the church, that the church is around to deal with that kind of thing. But those things are real. Just know and understand we have power over those things. By the way, you have power over that in your own house. If you're a Christ follower, you can start rebuking it immediately and drive that out yourself. You have that power. But just like, if you need to know what to do, just let us know. Don't let your kids get wrapped up in this stuff too. Kids get fascinated with this. Oftentimes kids are the ones most interested in this, especially when they know you hate it. So, not that you should pretend to like it, but Josh.
Is necromancy a part of this?
Yeah, necromancy is a type of magic dealing with the dead. Magics are generally broken up into a number of categories. In the scriptures, necromancy is having dealings with the dead, and usually they mean speaking to spirits of the dead, which might be spirits of the dead, or they might just be demonic agencies. So we don't know what demons are. Like, even in the church, we don't know what demons are. If you've been told they're fallen angels, that's one view of demonic agencies. Another view is that they're wicked disembodied spirits. Another view is that they are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim that can't go to heaven or hell. But communicating with the dead or trying to communicate with the dead, bad idea. Don't do that, ever. And that includes, like, if you're a Christian and you're like, Grandma came to talk to me the day after she died in my dream. Don't have a conversation with Grandma because it's probably not Grandma. Yeah, Kevin.
The interesting thing to me about the occult is how it played a role in the Nazis in Germany. When we were talking about Parsons and the rockets, when he died, it was right at the same time where von Braun came on the scene.
Yeah.
Developed the Saturn rocket.
Yeah.
Forced to go to the moon. And Parsons was a solid fuel propulsion
Yeah.
expert. Von Braun developed the V-2 rocket, which was liquid. He was an SS officer.
Yeah.
And took all the vows that the SS officers did, the blood rituals and so forth.
Yeah.
And we brought him over here. There's always been the idea that Parsons left the scene because von Braun wanted the power and developed it like it was. It's still.
Oh, Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. I don't want to use interesting because I don't want to get fascinated.
Right.
I can be interested in knowing what he did.
Yeah, so occasionally our culture will try to represent Nazi Germany as having some kind of Christian origin or Christian roots because they used some like logos with God in their symbology or on gates or things like that or on a belt buckle. But if there's a good book, I think it's called like Hitler and the Occult or Nazis and the Occult, something like that. But it just unpacks a lot of what was going on behind the scene. These guys were neo-pagans straight down the line. Their intention was to bring forth like a ancient Norse cruel mysticism that centered in on the occult, like blood rituals and everything. And look up Operation Paperclip. You know that when the Nazi regime was done, we gave them new names and brought them over here. And many of these guys were already involved in occultic experimentation at that point. And so we kind of brought them whole cloth into our government and went, what do you guys know? And learned a whole bunch of things, I'm sure. Okay. It was. Not just to gain the scientists, but to gain their knowledge regarding occultic rituals and practices. Yeah. Yeah. Catholic Church was instrumental in that as well. Catholic Church has definitely two bodies within it, but that's a discussion for another time. Luke 8, verse 16 and 17. Let's close out with this. What do we do with this? We don't hide. We're not like secret societies. We do not light a lamp and put it under a bushel. Now, no one after lighting a lamp covers it with a container or puts it under a bed, but he puts it on a lampstand so that those who come in may see the light. For nothing is hidden that will not become evident, nor anything secret that will not be known and come to light. Whatever occurs in the darkness will be brought into the light. Christ will reveal all things. You might look at some of this stuff and go, how do we unpack all this? If this many powerful agencies, and if the hand of the adversary himself is at work in all these things, how on earth can we possibly oppose it? You don't have to. We got a God who's doing that. And he will bring all this to light. And you can relax because you're protected from this stuff even now. Okay. Secondly, God will deal with this. Hebrews 4:13, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him with whom we must give an account. God is going to contend with all of this. He's going to deal with the darkest figures imaginable. Somebody like Aleister Crowley is not going to get away with it. Like that guy is going to experience punishment the likes of which you cannot even imagine. And that's true of some of the darkest figures in our history. Some of the Hollywood elites who are even now destroying their lives for money and fame have something terrible coming down the line for them. You're either not going to get away with it or you're going to get saved by the same grace that saved us. Amen. All right, we got to wrap up. Let's pray. Lord and God, there's a whole lot of dark forces going on in this world, major awful things that transpire. And Father, I praise you that you are a God of light, and you are a God of truth and of evidence, bringing forth what is true. Father, I just want to ask your blessing on all of us as we go forth. I pray, Father, that though the nations rage, or the peoples plot in vain, Father, that you laugh at them. Father, you know what is coming. You know what is going on. And the greatest machinations of the enemy do not begin to scratch the surface of your kingdom. Father, praise you that we are part of that kingdom. We love you. Be with us. Help us to be salt and light. It's in your name we pray. Amen.